Hello, I'm Grace and I want to talk about modifications on the CRF300L. So you just bought a brand new 300 and you want to do some relatively hard enduro. Now, it's a dual sport, it's not really designed for that, so you're going to need to modify a few things on this bike so that you don't hate your life and you don't break your bike. So here in Thailand, we actually do quite a lot of enduro on the CRF300L, and that's because buying specialized enduro bikes like your KTMs, your Husqvarnas, your Gas is prohibitively expensive here. So for the same price of one KTM, we can usually get about 3 of these CRF300L. And that's why we tend to buy these cheap bikes and modify them. So if we're going to ride some enduro on this bike, what are we going to change out? Now, this bike, I've already modified a bunch of stuff on it, and we'll just go through some of those features. Now, starting from the back, exhaust. So this bike has a full stainless system. So the full stainless system is a lot lighter than the stock system, but it's also much more open. So you're going to get a little bit more horsepower. It's got a powerbomb style expansion chamber here, and you want to get a little bit more power. You're going to get a crisper throttle response under load, and anything you can do to improve the power to weight ratio of this bike is going to help, because the bottom line is you're trying to ride enduro on this bike. It's heavy. So first thing we do, aftermarket full stainless system. Now, I make these ones here in Chiang Mai, and if I say so myself, our fabricator here is a magician. His welds are fish scale. They're just beautiful. I love it. But he also makes them in full titanium, and the full titanium, they are a work of art. Now, as you'd expect, titanium being expensive, the titanium full systems are a bit more expensive, but they're also very, very light. So again, anything you can do to improve your power to weight ratio is going to make your life way more fun when you're out on the trail. It's not particularly quiet anymore, but that's what you get when you take all the contents out of your exhaust and de-restrict it. While you're looking at the exhaust, you're probably going to see that you have a whole bunch of emissions equipment attached to your bike. In America, I believe that they've taken the California specs and applied them across the board. So you're going to have a charcoal canister as well as an EGR valve, and it's quite nice to delete that. You save yourself a little bit of weight. You clean up your engine a little bit. You don't have all these little bits sticking out. And it can also decrease popping on deceleration, which is not particularly noticeable with the stock exhaust, but you may notice it more with the aftermarket exhausts. So if you wish to delete your EGR valve, I have a kit for that. It's got a block-off plate so that you can block off the intake on the side of your engine there, and then you just basically follow that hose all the way up and rip off everything that's attached to it. So first you're going to get to the EGR, rip that one off. You're going to have to unplug 1 or 2 sensors. There's one sensor on your EGR, and there's one sensor which is on your charcoal canister. So both of those we supply block-off plugs. So you plug that into where you've disconnected the sensor, and that way you don't get a check engine light for the rest of forever. Let's look at a bit of protection. I got a bit of protection on the bike here. It's a nice bike. It was pristine when I started throwing it down mountains, so I put a little bit of protection on the swing arm there. But I think this is really important. So this little bit of plastic here, your plastic side frame protection, this is going to stop your boot from wearing the coating off your frame. Now, that's super important because you don't want your frame to be scratched. You don't want it to be rusting. So that's what we do. We get this little bit of plastic and it prevents that from happening. Now, you can get this kind of protector in aluminium, but I don't recommend it. The plastic does the job very, very well. It's light, it's easy. It also is really nice to grip on with your boot when you're riding. I find the aluminium is either slippery or you kind of get the buckles on your boot caught on it. So I don't recommend that. So yeah, a bit of plastic here. It's a good investment. first thing you do when you get the bike so that you don't scratch up your frame with your boots. All right, we're still at the back of the bike. I've got a luggage rack here. This one is so that when you head out into the wilderness, you can strap a dry bag to the back. You've got your tire levers, you've got your spare tubes, you've got your multi-tool, you've got your water filter, you've got your painkillers, your energy drink, and a couple of pairs of undies, and you're all good. I really think that's as much as you want to be doing in terms of luggage carrying capacity on a bike like this. If you are going to travel a lot on a bike like the CRF300L, you can definitely do it, but I would be recommending a rackless setup. So something like the Moscow Moto, maybe the R40. The R80 is great. It's really big. This is a pretty small bike, so I would be trying the R40 and seeing if I could travel light enough to make that work. Tail tidy. So as you can see, we don't have the big, ugly plastic fender here. The first reason for that is the ugly plastic fender is usually a temporary addition to your bike, and you want to take that off before you lose it down a trail with your number plate attached to it. So we get rid of that plastic fender, and you can see we have a really tidy little fender delete here. So we've retained all of the stock lights, which is really good because I think these stock lights give you much better visibility than you get on, say a lot of the tail tidies out there that have integrated indicators. So that's really good. So keep your stock lights. You don't need to fuck with them. You don't need to spend money unnecessarily getting new lights and stuff. Just keep them there and then just delete your fender with one of these little brackets here. If you're holding the number plate on a small bracket, you want to make sure that the back of your number plate is supported, because if you just drill 2 holes through your number plate, put 2 bolts in it, and it's attached to a small piece of aluminium, what's going to happen is if you have a large number plate, and a lot of jurisdictions do, not all, but a lot, it's going to vibrate and then it's going to crack. And then you're going to have 2 halves of your number plate. So we don't want that. So what I recommend is you get one of these little aluminium number plate holders. It's got aluminium on the back. It's got a little frame around the edge. It's like $3 at your local shops. Get yourself a number plate frame to help support your number plate so that you don't crack it in half by attaching it to a small anchor point. Anyway, once you've done this, you're really all good, because the other good thing is you see there's nothing here that's going to get smashed to pieces by the rocks, by the roost coming off your back tire. So you should be good. As long as you don't backflip the bike, you'll be good for a while. On this side of the bike, we have our radiator guard. Very important, because radiator guards are cheap and radiators are expensive. It's very easy to squash your radiator by dropping the bike on its side. It's very easy to get a piece of bamboo straight through your grill. So we don't want that. So you've got this radiator guard. This one's by THEP. They're made in Thailand. I definitely rate them. Really good radiator guards. You can also get them from SRC, another Thai brand. They make really great stuff. These come in silver. They come in black. You've got the grill, which is going to protect the front of your radiator. And then you also have this really substantial bracket here on the CRF300L version, which is going to protect your radiator from getting squashed from the side. So radiator guard, go for that. Now, you can see we've got an aluminium skid plate here. Always get yourself a good skid plate. Again, skid plates are cheap and engine cases very expensive. This skid plate has taken a massive impact. I don't even know what happened to this bike to cause that amount of imprint on a solid aluminium bash plate. But you can imagine if there was no bash plate, or if it was flimsy plastic, this bike would be toast. So always a good skid plate. Now there's two options with your skid plates. You can get the skid plate, which is quite short. It just comes up to about here. It ends before your rear shock. The advantage for that is that you're still protecting your engine case there, but it's a bit lighter. Now, if you want more protection and you're willing to carry around a little bit more aluminium, you can get a skid plate like this. And I don't know if you can see it in this video either, but the skid plate has a piece of aluminium that goes all the way back underneath the rear shock. So that is awesome. Good protection, good investment. So we talked about long skid plates, good protection. They're a little bit heavier than the short ones. Up to you. You make the call whether you want to protect the bottom of your rear shock there or not. We're going to talk more about rear shocks in a second. Let's move to the front of the bike now. We have handlebars. This is the first thing I replace when I get a new CRF300L or 300 Rally, because the stock bars, they're weak. They're just weak. The first time you drop the bike, your bars are going to be bent. You're going to have a problem. So just save yourself the hassle and get yourself decent bars from the outset. Now, my go-to is the Renthal Twinwall 996. And so the 996 describes the bend of the bars. And the 996 is a really nice low bend, which is what you want when you're riding enduro. If you're like riding around on, I don't know, maybe you've got a rally and you really just want to cruise, you really just want to do a lot of touring or that sort of thing, maybe you want some higher bars, maybe that's comfortable for you, up to you. But I reckon if you're riding enduro, you don't want bar risers and you don't want a high bend on your bars. You want those bars nice and low. It's going to give you the proper ride position to have proper control of the bike. So 996 is a good bend. I think 997, a bit tall. But, you know, everyone's got their preferences. Now, Renthal 996, the Twinwall, they're a fat bar. So they're 28 millimeter in diameter instead of 22 millimeter in diameter, which is what the stock bars are. So in order to use fat bars, which are indestructible, on these bikes, you are going to need to get a set of fat bar adapters, because obviously the clamps are made for skinny bars and you're going to have fat ones. One thing to watch out for when you get those adapters, first of all, like I say, I don't recommend getting really big risers. You can get the adapters that are going to rise your bars up another 2 or 3 centimeters. I don't recommend it. Get the lowest ones you can if you want to ride enduro. Do what makes you happy, but that's my 2 cents worth. Anyway, the other thing you want to watch out for is you want to make sure that these clamps are made from really good quality aluminium. Poor grade aluminium is going to be prone to snapping. And when, you know, it's really brittle, when it fails 100%. So if you like to have your handlebars attached to your motorcycle, I definitely recommend making sure that your fat bar adapters, that your clamps that hold in your handlebars are made out of decent metal. HiVolt Spares, we sell a set which is made out of high grade aluminium, no particular brand. We just make them here in northern Thailand. But whatever you do, pay attention to the grade of aluminium. If you see some super cheap clamps on the internet, it's on, I don't know, maybe you saw it on AliExpress and they're, you know, $10. Chances of it being really good aluminium, not so good. I have seen these components break. So that's a thing that you probably want to avoid. The other thing, I mean, this springs to mind, speaking of poor grade aluminium, sometimes you see those triple clamps, you know, CNC triple clamps, they look really pretty. I've seen those snap as well, like literally snap in half. The bike is in 2 pieces. So yeah, so stay away from cheap, low grade aluminium anywhere around your handlebars, because this is where all the big forces are happening. You also want to have some decent handguards. Some enduro riders don't like to have the hard aluminium wraparound handguards like this. Especially if you're racing, there's a risk you could break some fingers. Obviously, like in motocross, that sort of thing, you don't see handguards like this. But if you're going to go around and do stupid things on your bike a lot and you're going to drop that bike on the ground a lot, you probably want to be protecting your hands and you probably want to be protecting your levers. So I always use the Acerbis Rally Pro. They are really strong. Bark busters, also really good. They're pretty universal fit. If you're running a decent set of handlebars like the Renthals that I just talked about, they're going to fit just fine. Thing to consider is this inside edge of your handguard. It attaches to a clamp that goes around the handlebar. Now, when you crash, what can happen is sometimes your handguard gets pushed up. And when it gets pushed up, it's not protecting your hand, it's not protecting your levers. So, and also, you know, then you have to get out your tools and try and put your handguard back into the place before you ride off again. That can be a pain. If you don't want that to happen, you can get these brackets which allow you to attach the inner edge of those handguards, not to the handlebars, but to your triple clamps. If you've upgraded your handlebars and then you've got good quality wraparound handguards and then you've got those mounts straight to your triple clamps, you've got a really strong front end of the bike, basically. It's going to be really hard to end up with bent bars. So that's always good. Now, just a few accessories on the front of the bike. We have folding mirrors here, which are on 1mm ball mounts. So what that means is that when we go into the jungle, if I want, I can just loosen them off and I can fold them in across the middle of my handlebars. And that way they're not going to get smacked and they're not going to get in my way. They're not going to get broken. The other thing I can do is it's just a ball mount, so I can undo the ball mount clamp altogether and I can just shove those in my backpack. I can shove them in my backpack if I want to use them when I ride home or if I'm just going dirt biking. I don't even need to take my mirrors at all. So, yeah. Now, these ones I have here, these are in the style of double take. They are not double take. And the price is indicative of this. Double take, very high quality, great product. I love double take. They also have a lifetime guarantee. If you manage to break any of like the plastic housing of the mirror, they'll send you a new one. And I've done that twice and they've sent me a new one every time. So that's really good. But if you don't have double take mirror money, you can also get this kind of mirror. It's not as strong, not as indestructible, but similar in functionality. And I think that's a good thing because the first thing that will break off your motorcycle is your stock mirrors. Like, you don't even know whether you should replace them when you break them off because that will be on day one, or whether you should replace them on day 0 because that'll just save you the trouble. Stock mirrors are not resilient at all. USB charger up here on the bars. That is really handy. I usually navigate using just an old Android phone. I load my GPX files onto that. I make my GPX files on that. I use Osmond. And I've never had a need for an actual GPS unit. So I'm always running my old phone on my handlebars and I use the USB charger to make sure that battery's always good. When you're wiring your USB charger, make sure that you wire it through switched power. It is switched off when your ignition's off. If you wire it straight to your battery, it's going to gradually drain your battery and you'll end up with a dead battery if you don't ride the bike every day. And now we can see the best bit on this whole bike. It's the Ohlins rear shock system. And so we have upgraded the rear shock. The OEM rear shock on these bikes is really, really terrible. It is possibly the worst Honda rear shock since the XR150. And that's saying something. That's saying something. So even I get on this bike at like 60 kilograms. It sags too much. It's springy like a pogo stick. It's got no rebound. It's got no damping. It's got no compression. So I recommend definitely avoiding it. Anyway, I digress. Rear shock upgrade, really good. I rate it. So what else? Foot pegs. I am holding my new favorite thing. I'm going to come and show you a little bit closer. I want to show you. These are my new favorite thing. These are my HiVolt foot pegs. They are made out of steel. As you can see, they have these vicious claws, kind of like a bear trap, They really grip your motocross boots, your enduro boots. So even when you're riding through a river, your feet are not going to slip off your pegs. They are wider and longer than stock. They are really comfortable. They are really strong. I love them to bits. I am super happy with these. So these are going to go on the bike today. And this is another little thing that I made. So it doesn't look like much, to be honest. And it's kind of hard to get the camera to focus on it, but you'll have to take my word for it. It is a gear shift shaft protector. So when you drop the bike on this side and you drop it on a rock and the rock shoves the gear shifter into the engine case and that gear shifter rod goes into the engine case, then you have a big problem, because if you damage that mechanism inside your engine case, you're going to have to split the cases to fix it. And it can be a showstopper, you know. You can be on the side of a mountain, you drop your bike, you damage that shifter shaft, and you're stuck in second gear for the rest of forever until you can go home or split the cases and fix it properly. So what this does is it basically prevents that from happening. It's a sleeve, an aluminium sleeve that goes around that shaft, and the gear shifter lever, when you drop the bike on the rock, is going to hit this piece of aluminium. And this piece of aluminium is going to disperse that force and is going to physically prevent the shifter shaft from being shoved inside your engine case. Now, installing this is an unholy pain, because you have to loosen off the bolts of all these little bits in all of the vicinity of your shifter shaft. And then you have to do this little wriggly thing and ease it into place, because it is not an easy process. So I warn you, if you want a shifter shaft saver, I can send you one, but you have much annoyance ahead of you when you try to install it. I think it's totally worth it though, because I cannot be bothered splitting my cases to fix my shifter shaft mechanism on the side of a mountain in Laos. So prevention being better than the cure, all of that. So one thing I forgot to mention when we were talking about handguards and bars is that we change out the levers on these bikes as well. We put pivot levers. They're obviously harder to break off. They're also shorter than the stock levers. These stock levers, if they will touch the inside of your handguard. And if they just even the slightest bit touch the inside of your handguard on the clutch side, this can mean that your clutch is not fully engaging and disengaging, and it can lead to a burnt clutch in no time at all. So by all means, make sure you're using levers which are going to not be anywhere near the edges of your handguards, because we don't want to be buying clutch plates more than we have to. All right. Now for this last bit, I'm going to make myself comfortable, because a lot of people like to disagree with me. But here's what I think. In my humble opinion, the slipper clutch on the CRF300L, on the CRF300 Rally, is a beautiful light clutch. It is so nice. It is so smooth. You can pull that clutch with your little finger. It is delightful. So relaxing. Love it. Except when I'm trying to ride enduro, because in my experience, you try to ride enduro with that clutch and sooner or later, you end up on the side of a mountain thinking about how you're going to have to walk home because your clutch has given up on you. Now, there will be those who say that the early failure of a stock clutch is solely down to rider error. However, I have 6 of these lovely CRF300Ls. We ride enduro with all of them, and all of them have had clutch problems in the first 1,000 or so kilometers. So, for me, this is a statistically significant failure rate. I will acknowledge that we put these bikes through punishment they may not be immediately designed for. And that's okay. We have to adapt. So, what we do is we build an aftermarket clutch pack, a really, really heavy-duty aftermarket clutch pack. inside the clutch basket from a CRF300L. And so we're changing the friction plates, we're changing the steel plates, we're changing the clutch springs. We are building a whole new clutch in there. And by the time you finish, it's a heavy clutch. It lasts. I have never killed one yet. My customers have never killed one yet. My guides have never killed one yet. These clutches, they last. And they take a lot of punishment. And the other thing is, the heaviness of this clutch is not only going to make it last a really long time because of its mechanical characteristics, but the bottom line is, unless you're strong like the Hulk, you cannot gently ride this clutch too much because this clutch is either going to be in or out. It's that heavy. So fantastic. If you need to do a sudden wheelie over a log, you just dump this clutch and it goes. It's fantastic. It's an upgrade. It's an upgrade that's only going to be appropriate if you want to ride Enduro. It's only going to be appropriate if you have a strong clutch hand and you have decent clutch control. It's not going to be for everyone, but I will say, if you want to ride hard Enduro on these bikes and you don't want to be stuck on the side of a mountain, you should upgrade your clutch. The only other thing that I would add would be you want to change your gearing ratio, go down a tooth on the front, go up a couple of teeth on the back for a bit more torque, and then you can basically wheelie through anything or lug through anything with these bikes. I mean, that's one of the things that makes these bikes actually a lot of fun in the really gnarly stuff, is they will lug through anything, and it makes your life a hell of a lot easier. So, they're good bikes, they're solid bikes, they need a few upgrades so that you don't break them if you ride hard Enduro with them, but they're capable of more than you might think. Yeah, that's about it. Put some decent tyres on your bike, get some really aggressive knobbies, make sure you've got Rimlocks so that you can drop that tyre pressure right down and go for your life. It's good fun.